Peace.
Peace, everyone. Shalom.
Shalom, shalom, shalom. Can you all hear us? How are you all? How's everybody?
Put a 1 in the chat if you're feeling musical today. All right, so we've been gearing up for this. What are we doing?
Okay, well, I'm kind of waiting to see if we get some feedback in the chat. A 1 or a 2. Can you hear us? Are we scratchy? Are we clear? Just all right. We have 1s. All right. So, before we even begin, I want to give thanks for this space and the opportunity to be able to share and build on, an epic film, right? But it's also, I think it's a great way for us to look at how we incorporate some of the teachings that Chief has shared. And I know you'll touch a lot on that. And, I'll try to touch on some of it too. But we're also pulling on you all as well to jump into the chat and share, because we would like for this to be a big, like a big build. And we have a surprise in store for you as well. So, good evening, everyone. This is a movie breakdown on the story of Noah. And, this film is a dramatic recreation of the biblical story of Noah and the flood. But they take a lot of creative license with this one, this story. But we can see a lot of the threads of the same storyline and the plot. We see some differences in, the brothers, who's the first, who's the last. But I really think it's important to pay attention to symbolic representation as well too. And there's a lot of that in there, and we're gonna jump in, and we're gonna dig into that.
We have to remember this is Noah the film, but it's also Noah the film from Hollywood.
Right.
So we're gonna compare the movie to the story that we see in the Bible. But first, let me introduce the director. So the director is Darren Aronofsky, and you might know his work from Pi, Black Swan, The Wrestler, and another film that our dear El Karar reviewed was Mother. So he delves into the unconscious mind a lot. And of course, Noah is another film that delves into the unconscious mind, in my opinion. The producers are Darren Aronofsky, Ari Handel, Cale Boyder, Chris Brigham, Scott Franklin, and a few other Jewish people. And the writer is also Darren Aronofsky and Ari Handel. And he's also the writer, the producer and director. Darren Aronofsky is also known for employing his own parents, who are well-known Jewish actors as well. So they are in most of his film. So what's happening in the world at this time?
Well, at this time, what we see is, and I mean, it's reflected in biblical accounts as well. But in the film, what you're actually seeing is there is absolute chaos. There's upheaval. Humanity rather is actually, it seems desolate because there's so much focus on desire, want, vices. So this is a time where there seems to be no leadership. There seems to be a lot of desolate places, but there's a lot of contention, a lot of fighting over resources and food. And so that's one of the reasons why the flood is imminent, and the flood just becomes, a huge part of this film. And one of the things you'll notice is as we're going through the film, we'll be focusing on themes. Right, so rather than giving you a play-by-play download of each, maybe a most important scene, we're actually looking at it from the perspective of themes, because there's so many different scenes that are connected to major themes, transformation being one of them, right? But flooding and the flood and water everywhere is one of the most important things that we see. So we wanted to ask you all, I'm going to throw out a question to you all. for you to answer. And we really want you all to, jump in and share.
Interactive.
Yeah, we want it to be interactive. So, if you know anyone, forward the link to them immediately so they can jump on and vibe with us. Are you familiar with any other flood stories? If you're familiar with any other flood stories, maybe you know a synopsis of that story and you want to drop it in the chat, please do so as soon as you can.
And they can be new ones, they can be older ones. Like, we don't know all the flood stories, but I also remember to like as you come in. Thank you for joining, everyone. But I want to say shout out to, I see Ima Yakira Eden, Akoti Yafe, Ima Top Tier Speakers, Peace Jerome Mine, Peace Akira Meek, Peace Sapta OG, Peace Ima Naya. Thank you all for being here. Okay, so
Who else? Anybody? Did we miss anybody?
I don't think we missed anyone.
All right. So, what are some of the flood stories that you all are familiar with? All right. You took mine, sis. Well, there's so many others. Maybe you could do a quick search. Do a quick search if you're not familiar with any. But we're going to jump in and share some of the flood stories that we came up with. And for those of you who are wondering, I'll say there are a few of Chief's lectures that are connected to the themes here that we discuss. And so some of those lectures will be shared in the description a little later on. But the Bereshit series, actually, listen, there were so many layers to this film. We had to pick and choose, or else we would be just like, we would still be in the rabbit hole together.
I know.
All right?
I see that Akosiape has an interesting one, Hurricane Katrina.
Hurricane Katrina is a flood story. I like that perspective.
It is. It was actually, and for that matter, Hurricane Dorian as well. Because I saw the aftermath. Well, not personally, but when I went there recently to Bahamas, I saw like how the trees. Like I've never seen like half-grown trees like all over the place because they're just starting to sprout up. So it actually, that reminded me of another one. So some of the flood stories that I found, as you know, if you read the Anyway Foundations, Volume 1, available for free, we read about Manu. And Manu is part of the Vedic tales, and it's in the Shatapatha Brahmana, and he is the sole survivor of a great flood. He gets a warning from a fish that the flood was coming, and he makes a sacrifice to the gods in the water, and from that sacrifice, a woman is manifested and is called the daughter of Manu, and they together repopulate the whole entire race of humans. So that's one. Also, in the Greek mythology, we have Prometheus. Prometheus has a son named Deucalion, and Deucalion is the father of Helen. And he makes an ark to survive the flood, sanctioned by Zeus, and he sails to safety to Mount Parnassus, where once again he starts civilization again with his wife. So it's getting some common strands here.
Right. And there you'll see that theme of death and rebirth or transformation in some form consistently. So one of the references I want to pull on reference, because I'm not going to get into the story. I just want to show you that there are other texts within history that make reference to flood. So even though the Epic of Gilgamesh, which I'm citing here today, is not necessarily a story that zooms in on the flood, there is a reference to it. So in the Epic of Gilgamesh, read the story yourself. Read the story yourself. But in the Epic of Gilgamesh, he's sent on a journey to actually, he goes on a journey because he wants to find the secret to long life, right? Because he loses a friend and, he wants to figure out how to live long because he doesn't want to die. So he goes to the very ends of the earth to find this very special man who survived a flood with his wife and was given the gift of everlasting life from the gods, right? This is a Sumerian tale for those who are, wondering. And that the name of that man that he had to seek was called Utu Napishti. So Utu Napishti is, I am making a conclusion that he is a similar he's probably a part of the archetypes of Noah, right? He's probably another Noah, but this is from the Sumerian tale. So we have
what are the other characters archetypes of him?
Or it could be, yes,
as
that's
you remember,
true.
the Sumerian myths are
Older.
before the Bible.
That's right. No, of course not. That's true, because the older ones are the standard. So everything else that comes after it, they're actually, it's a mimic or a recreation. Let's jump into the chat a little bit before we share our surprise with you. All right. So we had Hurricane Katrina. But that's it. Sister Yakira Eden says, yes, this was a good movie full of thematic nuances to dig into. All right. So no one else has any other flood stories to
Peace,
share?
El Karar.
Pisaki El Karar. All right. Welcome.
Oh, where are the flood stories?
Not one. Not even one. Well, maybe it's going to come through. All right. So here's what we wanted to share. As we get into the flood, we thought that it would be a great thing. All right, let's pause because I see Yakira Eden sharing one. She shares that there's also the Kemetic flooding of the earth by Sekhmet due to man's unfair and disrespectful conduct. It's known as the flood of blood. Yes, I remember. There are parts to this that I remember because that flood of blood is Sekhmet going absolutely blind with rage and just, killing everything in sight, So it seems that there's also, with the flooding, there's also this continuous theme of disobedience and breaking of the law and lawlessness, and there always being a need for transformation. But before we get into it and dig into it, we are going to invite a guest on just to share some of the Sumerian story with you and give you some a little bit of back history to flooding and other creation stories that are, very important to this film. All right. So just give us one moment and we're going to switch it up a little bit.
That's right, Brother Rami, the Johnstown flood, he says, in Mississippi. Thank you. And thank you for clarifying, Yakira Eden, that she was stopped by Ra. I do remember that. Who is it?
Peace. Peace, everyone. Greetings. Good to be here.
Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit more on the Sumerian, creation myths. One of the stories that I know is from Eridu Genesis. And for those who don't know who the Sumerians are, they were the first human civilization in world history. So first. And they invented many things like the first writing system, time and clocks, surgery. So yeah, and so much more. So this particular flood story that I'm referring to was found on the cuneiform tablets. And just to give a quick summarization, the gods who the Sumerians called the Anunnaki, yes, they believe in the Anunnaki. So the Anunnaki, they determined to destroy mankind with the flood. And in particular was the two gods Anu and Enlil. And so this all took place in the land of Eridu, which many know as Eden or the Garden of Eden. And Enki was another one of the Anunnaki gods, and he didn't believe in the decree to destroy Eridu. So he told Ziusudra, who many know as Noah, it's another name, he told him to build a boat or ark and ride out the flood. So that's what he did. And afterwards, Ziusudra went to Anu and Enlil and told them what happened, and the gods rewarded him with immortality. So that's just a quick summarization But you'll find that when looking at the many different creation stories, that there are different versions because the clay tablets were broken, so there were like missing pieces. And so many scholars they refer to the Akkadian and Babylonian stories because they was able to record what was on the tablets. So yeah, and if you're interested in more stories from the Akkadians and the Babylonians, you can look at the Atrahasis story because that also came from the tablets. So just wanted to share that
Right.
and give thanks.
And
Yeah.
if you know, Ima Sequoia teaches our Anunnaki class in Anu, so that's why we called her, because she's our expert in that area as of today. So we're going classes and
yeah. And it's to showcase too that there are internal classes that we take within Anu, and so this is just an opportunity for us to share a little bit with you all. All right, so back to what did you think about the film? Before you leave, what did you think about the film? Did you like it? How was it? Important.
Y'all put me on spot.
Yeah.
I didn't watch the film.
All right.
I have to go back and watch it. I didn't watch it. I heard a lot about it, but I just haven't watched it just yet. So
Bye.
All right, bye.
Please give thanks. That was really edifying. Thank you for adding to the build. So we wanted to find out, just before we move on, we wanted to see, Rami, no, don't laugh at us. Don't laugh. We wanted to see if, so far, if you have heard any threads, right? And if there were any threads or are any threads. And I mean, comparing all of the flood stories, including the most recent ones that you put in the chat. What is one reoccurring theme that you see consistently happening when floods arise? I feel like there are a few of them, but never mind what I feel. What are some of the consistent threads that you all see throughout all of these flood stories?
What's one that you see?
Well, so one of the consistent themes that I think I mentioned it before. I mean, absolute lawlessness, right? When there is just a complete disregard for the law or complete disregard for nature, the environment, and all of the evidence of creation. So that's consistent. Vices, people just actually making their vices a god.
Yeah, I kind of see it as a rebirth too. Like, I believe in one of the classes, it was name code in the Bible. I believe that Chief did on one Sabbath, and you can look it up on the Anu Life Global Ministries YouTube channel. He spoke about name code in the Bible and how Tubal Cain, who we're going to get into, Tubal Cain was necessary because it takes that sort of madness for a new life to come forth, and a new that's aligned with the Most High. So everyone served a purpose.
Right. There's a lot of the law of cause and effect that we see in this film. And Yaffe says there's always a goal to restart mankind or repopulate. That's true. So we can move on from the theme of flooding. Well, because we're going to actually circle back to it, and we're going to jump into the idea of the seed. All right. And for those of you who watched the film, please share if the flood had any significance to you that you wanted to share. This is supposed to be engaging. Jump on in. And if you do want to get on and share, please say so, and we'll be happy to share the link with you.
But what does this picture? Okay, we'll stoke your memory with this picture. Right. And I hope you all watch the film.
I hope. Oh boy. Nothing.
Okay. Over there.
Okay. Bloodline first.
Not that one.
Which one?
The one with the seed.
The one with the
The
seed.
plant.
The plant. The seed. All right. So we're going to start off with this picture to kind of to jog your memory, right? And if you remember this scene in the film, I think there's a few important things happening. Again, this is a very desolate land. That's one of the first scenes that we see. So there is, and it sort of reminds me of even the opening scenes to Space Odyssey, where there's just like a lot of rolling land with not much fertility. There's no signs of fertility, and I think that's very significant in this film.
Yeah. Imaya Kira Eden says, I'd agree the cycle of disobedience often results in cleansing. Water is the beautiful and unrelenting cleanser. And Akoti Yafe says, I thought that the scene where the flood started was reminiscent of Chief's breakdown, Bereshit, and the idea of the upper waters and lower waters, the separation of the firmament.
Right?
Yeah, this scene was really significant because in that same breakdown that Chief did, it was actually Genesis in Bereshit, the fourth one. He explains that the seed represents transformation, and it's the beginning of corruption. Like it's the beginning. It's the path from the explosion of corruption, basically of man's corruption. So I thought this was significant as the seed sprouted. Right after this scene, we see Noah tell his sons, "Hi, man is coming," and they're killing the animals, which is forbidden. So
Yeah. So one of the things when you said that it is beginning of corruption, the seed brought me instantly to the idea of Abel being slain in the land and then he turning into the seed, right? And so the seed becomes this symbolic representation of a savior, right? And we see that throughout this film, because throughout this film we're seeing two things. We're seeing we're seeing the seed, right, which is a representation, as you said, at the beginning of corruption and also the beginning of a lineage. And you're also seeing it alongside the symbol of water, or we keep seeing mem, water, over and over again together. So I think it's also important to note that we see the seed again later on as the birth or the beginning of a forest that eventually gives rise to another savior, which is the ark. So that I think there are all these threads of symbolism throughout the film. I definitely think so.
are you able to take this?
Yeah, we can take it off. Yeah, we can take it off. We can take it off. I wanted us to actually go to one of the comments. No, not this one. I think it was Sister Yafe that says yes, the plant from a drop of water. Right, and I think that drop of water is significant because we see again that drop coming up over and over again, but we also see Noah having premonitions, and all of his premonitions are, he is submerged in water, or he's seeing, I think at one point he's submerged in water and surrounded by, animals that are like swimming, right? So, and people actually. So I definitely think again that there's this running consistent theme between water and the seed. And the seed cannot sprout without water. So again, I think it just goes back to that idea of regeneration.
And don't forget that Chief has taught us. It was quick. It was a quick reference. He said the symbol for Enki is a seed in water. And Enki is Yah. So there is an acknowledgement there of whoever's directing this movie, Darren Aronofsky, that they are acknowledging the Sumerian stories, in my opinion.
It's I don't think it's your opinion. Like they are recognizing it. They are actually probably highlighting it, if anything. But I really think it's important if you don't know the symbolism, if you don't know the representation, if you don't even consider Sumerian history or Sumerian recounts or Sumerian accounts of history, then you won't be able to put those pieces together. All right, so I thought I wanted to hear from you all. What were some of your thoughts on the representation of the seed? Did the picture jog your memory? And is there anything you wanted to share? Ramik says, I had a similar dream that resonates with the movie. I was escaping dark waters and saw a man with a beard working on the ship. I asked why he was working alone. Then I was helped on the ship or the ark. Right. Right. So there are all these running themes, right, in our own lives, but also, throughout the film and throughout some of the recounts in the story. Anything else? Any other points that you wanted to bring up?
No. I think I really like what Sister Yafe said about the Bereshit and that idea of the upper and lower waters, because every time we study these flood stories, I try not to go there, but I have to go there. It reminds me of the subconscious waters, and just that these are thoughts. These Noah's a thought, and all these people getting wiped out are unwanted thoughts or thoughts that don't align with truth. So that's why the flood had to come through, and I'm just comparing it to the wording that was used in Bereshit, like the anyways, we'll get into that. But yeah, that's what it reminded me of.
Okay. I think about the idea of the Shemayim and some of that breakdown of Shem being the heavens. So that's one of the ways that you can see that there's like a differentiation between the waters that are heavenly waters or upper waters and lower waters.
And not to mention that this producer often delves into those types of themes. Like look what Mother was. We broke that down. I think did Chief break it? No, it was El Karar. Yeah, Aki El Karar broke that down, and just I think Chief added in some stuff. But what that house represented and how she was going through different levels of her subconscious. So we have to keep that in mind that he does like to explore those types of themes.
Top tier speaker says the seed reminds me of what was taught in the Genesis breakdown. Man's seed is equal to thoughts. Right. So you see again thoughts. So I think it also goes back to your point when you say that the seed is the beginning of corruption. Right? So it's almost like, and yes, the beginning of a lineage, but it's human lineage. So it's still corruption, because even though we were made in the image and likeness of the Most High, we will die like men. We will die like men. So there's this constant tying back to corruption. And the flesh is also considered like a form of corruption because it's dying, right? Because it's flesh. So much sin and uncleanness reminds me of modern day Babylon. Well, maybe that's directly connected to all of the floods that we do see as a result of hurricanes and other things.
Akira Eden says, yes, Sister Yamina, I tend to think of the left and right hemisphere of the flesh brain. That's interesting. What do you mean? What do you mean?
He wants you to expound.
Or even the components of mind. Okay, I can think components of mind versus brain. What about the hemisphere, left and right brain? Can you go into that? Please, do you mind?
Top tier speakers also says the seed also represented that thing that was unadulterated. Genesis part 1 breakdown. Mm-hmm. This is true. I have to go back to the idea of the gopher, right? Because in and again, the flood story that this film actually recreates is the flood story in Genesis, 6 to 8. So if you go back there, you kind of see what the decree was in terms of the type of wood that should be used. And in that instance, I think we went.
You're trying to find out what gopher wood.
Right. What was gopher wood and its significance, right? Because down to the measurements, the measurements were very accurate.
Like, what's a cubit?
Right. Yes, exactly.
If you read Genesis, the measurements of the ark are given. I think it's 300 by 500 cubits.
I think.
Yeah.
So and down to the wood. So and we were also thinking about the significance and the symbolic representation of identifying the pairs and saying for specific animals it would identify his and her, right? So it's almost like there was ownership between the male and the female as they were paired going on to the ship. But we have another picture that we're going to use to just jolt your memory. Okay, I think we can jump into the genealogy a little bit. So we wanted to just share a quick picture of the genealogy from Noah to the 12 patriarchs because, and you can probably zoom the screen because I don't think we can. One of the things that I think is really significant is, you can try it and see. One of the things I think is significant with the genealogy in this film is to see, the value of introducing characters such as Tubal-Cain and characters such as Methuselah and using those names. Those names are biblical references, and I think it's really significant. When we were researching and just, looking at what are the thoughts on, I will take it off now. What are some of the thoughts on around the film, especially for those who are Christian, identify as Christian, and identify with this text as if it's the only text, right? But one of the things we found was that there were some inconsistencies that they observed, and some of those inconsistencies kind of it made the film have a bad rap. So I really think that we wanted to hear from you all as you looked at the film. What were some of the differences? As we go through the different themes, what are some of the differences that you noticed throughout the plot and the storyline? Master Manilek, okay, before that, Kira Eden says, my comment was connected to you referencing the subconscious mind and that division.
Okay, thank you. A cubit is 1 foot 6 inches. But does anybody remember at the beginning of the film what line was mentioned? There's a few lines of genealogy that are in Genesis, but what specific line was mentioned? It was printed at the beginning of the film. Do you all remember? Because this has a lot to do with the genealogy and why Tubal-Cain is at odds with Noah. Someone comment in the chat. But what differences did you notice?
So one of the things that I thought was significant, but these are like later on in the film, is the switching up of the sons, right? There's a difference in who's the elder son and who's the youngest son. And I also found that I think while we were looking at this film, I couldn't handle, was it Ham? Was it Ham I had a problem with the whole time? Throughout the film, it was very hard to actually wrap my mind around how many times Ham actually was disobedient, not just to the law of the Most High, but more importantly to his father, because his father was given that important role. She said Shem was too soft.
Yeah, but they didn't switch around the Shem Ham thing.
No,
Shem was the eldest, Ham's
I
second.
thought so. I thought so the entire time. Mathematics says Shem was too soft. They grew up building an ark, and he looked like a
Cover girl.
A cover girl. Oh my god. Okay.
Too pretty.
He was too pretty. All right. I didn't even pay attention to that.
But why was Ham annoying?
So I think it was constantly a disregard for obedience, a disregard for law, but more importantly, he did not see the value in what his father was doing. He did not see the value in, his father being given such an important role in the preservation of a lineage. He didn't see that. He didn't see that. And I think it was also very easy for him to desire a woman. All he was focused on was the idea of manhood. Oh, and I can't speak to it because I'm not a man. But his idea of manhood was actually just mating with a woman, right? He wasn't able to see that there were other things that he needed to do. I actually found that there was a very important quote that his father shares with him. And this is from our theme under bloodline and, bloodline and manhood. And so one of the things he said to him was, be a man and do what needs to be done, right? So there was that consistent, his father had to, Noah, I keep saying his father, but Noah had to keep reminding him of their purpose and the value. But more importantly, I think my annoyance was his focus on thinking that manhood was actually equivalent to him just meeting or being with a woman. And it had nothing to do with the quality of the woman. He was just like, listen, I'm going to go out there in the chaos of the golem, because that's another theme that kept coming up as we were discussing it. A lot of the other nations, or what maybe others would call like heathen nations, were, I saw them as golem. And at that point, he felt it was good enough to just find a woman. And for those of you who are recalling that part of the film, I think I'm jumping ahead, but we're going based off of themes. So if there are any other clips or parts of the film that are connected to bloodline and you want to jump in and share, please do. He finds her in a ditch with dead bodies.
No, he does.
Yeah, he finds her in a ditch with dead bodies and thinks that that's appropriate. That's good. So I just found that part like a bit telling. And we understand that Ham is a representation of wanting or desire, right? And it's also very much connected to flesh. Is there anything you wanted to add or jump in on?
I'm just gonna go to the chat real quick. Master Miller says, plus his women did all the talking for him. I think he's speaking about Shem. Yeah. Shem was putting in that work. He had to protect the fam, says Akiramik. Noah trusted Shem. He kept calling on him. Noah knew Ham was not ready yet. Akotiapi says, true. I thought Ham was the root chakra, which also speaks to him moving based on desire. He separated himself from his father. Yeah. What stood out to me was something that, so I asked about the quote of Aki Ramik says, the by the sweat of your brow quote. Not that one. It was the one about Seth. So basically that Noah comes from the line of Seth, and he's here to redeem mankind. And as we know, that Noah means a time of rest, as we learned from name code in the Bible. So that's what, and the Tubal Cain is from the line of Cain. So yeah, it's just the different sets of genealogy I could see They kind of messed it up a bit. There are some inconsistencies because Tubal-Cain in the Bible is brother to Nama, who Nami was Noah's wife. So I was wondering why they switched that part up a bit. And Nami made it on the ark because she had to carry on the line of Cain, which is why there were still Nephilim in existence after the flood, because they came through her. And this is not my words. This is from I'm paraphrasing from Chief, everyone.
Yeah.
so that's what we learned. I think there's some. Seth was a redemption, and the children of Cain had a bone to pick. Yes, and even though Nama was a daughter of Cain. Yeah, Cain means to possess. So Tubal-Cain had that streak in him. You know, he wanted to possess everything. He was like, you know, what, my father's forgotten about me. Forget him. I'm going to take your birthright. And he kills Lamech at the beginning, right in front of Noah, just knock him down. So peace, rhythm continues.
Peace, greetings. Yeah, you know, you were talking. There's a part that you were talking about, and I wanted to jump on. And yes, that idea of Cain representing the root chakra, as well too, very in like form as Ham. I think that they desire the same things. They're going after the same things. And one of the things that stood out to me when it came to Cain was how offended he was. When there's a part in the film where he addresses Noah. I cannot remember his words, but he is absolutely he's so upset with Noah that Noah would call on the Most High, and it's almost like he became, as Christians would say, blasphemous in a sense, right? And I found that his offense with the idea of a creator greater than himself was, you know, very telling, because he wanted that. He wanted that role of being the person who ruled over everyone. And I found that interesting. Like he literally, you could see him as a character battling with the idea of there being something greater than himself.
Well, wasn't that the problem with Cain when with Abel? That was the whole problem. But that's because they're from a divine bloodline. Remember that we learned that Cain is not of Adam; he's from Yah, aka Enki. So there is this entitlement there in that genealogy. So Akirami would rather take Shem with him on a mission rather than Ham, because Ham might snake him. Yeah, literally. That's why he's wearing the serpent. The serpent on. Did anyone notice that they're wrapping their hands in this serpent skin?
Right.
Master Menelik says, I noticed that they're vegetarians. The Creator hasn't cared about what happened here since he marked Cain.
True.
Cain.
True. So, anything you wanted to jump into with the bloodline before we move on?
There's so much with the bloodline, but
how about, he says Tubal-Cain considered them orphans. Well, right, right. That's part of his offense. Like, he feels deserted, abandoned. Right, exactly. He feels deserted, and therefore, you know, he has disdain almost. You know, but it's sad because he's blinded. He doesn't see that disdain and that rejection actually causes him to embrace more of his vices, and the people that he's leading, they do the same. They do the same.
But that's the mark is the oath that the Most High made put on Cain, because they were supposed to wander the earth aimlessly and without purpose. So he's just, you know, he's just fulfilling the destiny that was set out for him from the beginning.
Right. You know, it's funny as you say that, because then we see that we all, there's a role and a purpose for everyone, and even all of the various nations. Each nation has a purpose.
That's a good point.
Yeah, each nation, and maybe there is just a nation that has to be a nation of Gala. They'll be programmed by someone else. They'll be programmed by something other than the Most High, and that's what their function is.
Yeah, that nation, like every nation being known for something. Like Tubal Cain was known for, what is it? Brass and iron. So that's why we see him, like that's the industrial age, it's the age of war. And so it's kind of, well, Chief explains that it's showing the different different stages of what's being brought in, what's being phased out. Like, was pastoralism being phased out at that time, and that's why Tubal Cain was there.
Right. So it is significant to the fact that he would turn to war for everything. Everything had to do with the tools of war, and definitely iron.
And that's why he was upset with Lamech at the beginning, because he was like, I need to mine my tools, right, and I can't mine them. And why, you know? So maybe his age was being phased out. But that's all I had for the bloodline.
The bloodline. If you want to build on the bloodline or add anything, please let us know. Master Menelik says, my brother and I watched this together, and he was like, why are you passing down this snake skin? Well,
what's the snake skin? Sister Yaffe says, I thought it was also foreshadowing of the Jacob and Esau story. Why him and not me? And what happens when it's no why him and not me? They just want favor from the father, so they end up killing the brother. And
right,
so
the sibling who they think is in favor at that moment, or who is in favor at that moment. This is true. Yeah, that's a good point.
Even I was wondering about the snake skin too, but this is why we had Ema Sequoia on here. What were Enki and Enlil known for having on their bottoms?
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. Okay, so top tier speaker, she's probably going to put it in the chat. She says, this is interesting that Noah's wife was named Nama, the mother of the Sumerian god Anki was Nama. That's why I was saying Nama, because of the N-E-M-M-A. Yeah. Wow.
What does Nama mean again? It means fatness.
Fatness.
Yes.
Okay.
So we learned that fatness is the best of. Remember that she shared that the best of the offering of the animal was the fat.
I see.
So
in this instance, Nama is a representation of an offering?
I think so. Possibly. Yes, I think so. Nama gave birth to heaven and earth. Okay, Ima Akira Eden says the snake skin seemed to represent an unnecessary rite of passage or transformation. Noah had not been able to participate in the ritual, and perhaps that's what kept him set apart. I definitely think it's a rite of passage, but I also think it represents that divinity. Because usually, at first we were connecting it to the serpent.
Right, true.
You know, but then looking into the other flood stories and looking at Sumerian gods, and Chief, I was saying, I'm telling you, look at name code in the Bible and Genesis and Bereshit breaks down for all of them. But we were looking at number 4, and Chief highlights that Enki and Lil are represented are human on top and serpents at the bottom. So that flipped my whole mind. I was like, what? Now what does the snake skin mean?
Right. You know, and it takes you back. It takes you back to the garden, right? Because this is where we see, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is where we actually see that an alternative perspective is offered, right, to Adam and Eve, let's say, right, or Hawa and Adam. So, it makes me, I wonder and question, but also see that there's a connection to something that's hidden, right? A knowledge that's hidden, that's very much present in that idea of the serpent. And, when we think about creation and what is being created, going back to the idea of seed being equal to thoughts, right? Where did that thought come from? Because all of the thoughts that we talk about thoughts, but what about the thoughts of the Elohim and the thoughts of the Most High? What is created in that mind? And if it's created in the mind, then it manifests here. So that question now becomes, what is the purpose of the serpent? Right? What is the serpent's role?
Yeah, Ikira Eden says, at the very beginning, his rite of passage was cut short and the skin was stolen, and him referring to Noah. I did forget about that. But I'm wondering if they're using the serpent skin as a distraction, or as a like they're inferring that it's something negative.
The serpent skin.
Like a serpent skin, like.
But
yes, we beat you to it, top tier. But Ikira Eden says, yes, serpents, and we know that's who first entered into Hawa.
Therefore, Nama, connecting back to pregnancy and being, filled with a thought. Being filled with a thought. I also think of, I'm trying to remember which one of the lectures, but there was a lecture we were listening to, and she kept saying, you're going to see that the serpent enters and is still on the ark. The serpent is still on the ark, and I kept saying to myself, okay, if the serpent is still on the ark, then Nama is that representation of the continuation of that energy of the serpent being present.
Or the line of Cain.
Or the line of Cain. Okay.
I mean, I'm just putting in my 2 cents, but yeah, the line of Cain.
I think, yes, Chris, you didn't say yes, you were typing it. Yeah, because, we are connecting, we were trying to focus on the thematic and the symbolic representation, and you do see that connection, right? You do see that connection. Master Menelik says the skin wasn't portrayed as something dark, but something divine, and that golden glow. Yeah, like a golden glove, almost. Almost like a golden glove.
But then he keeps seeing a serpent. That is a scene, right? Where he keeps seeing a serpent slithering.
Especially when he receives a premonition. When he receives a premonition and he gets a visual in his mind's eye. And it's funny because not funny, but we see Nama saying to him over and over, it's almost like she's bugging him. You get a vision yet? He spoke to you yet? It was not in those words, but she said it on more than one occasion. She inquired as to whether he received a vision or heard from. We can make an assumption it's the Creator.
Yes. It seemed they flashed a snake photo when someone was about to make a decision or to do something. Very true.
Yes, very true.
They let the whole crew of serpents on. It was bound to happen. They had to, 7 of each kind. They had to.
Top tier speaker says, the serpent is Enlil or Anki, as you're referring to, foreshadow of Luciferian aspect, rebellion aspect, Genesis 4 breakdown. There it is. There it is. So it would make sense that that green snake would be flashed whenever a decision is being made, because here it's a reminder of the will that we all have, and so it's kind of like, well, what will your decision be, right? And will it be influenced by the serpent? So I do think that there are two perspectives happening here on the serpent, or they're giving us these symbols so that we too can, like make a decision. But at the same time, there is there are parts of this film that I think the producer aims to undermine the biblical accounts of the story, because I think part of it goes back to Master Menelek's point. Menelek's point is that the glove is seen as something divine. So there is, and the serpent being connected to something divine. Yeah. Whereas if like if you're reading scripture, you're not seeing the serpent as divine.
No.
No.
But if you're
depending on the the lens
if
that you're reading from.
If you study scripture, I think there's a different perspective, because Cain, which Name is the line of, is from Yah, who was Enki, who was represented by a serpent. So I don't have the answers.
Right.
I'm just looking at things differently, or from a broader perspective, and seeing what confusion Hollywood was trying to put in my mind in this film.
Right.
And is anyone gonna get Methuselah these berries? I'm telling you. Can someone give Methuselah his berries? Sorry.
He certainly sacrifices his last breath for those berries. I don't even think he tasted them. But the idea or the connection to Enlil then would then indicate that the idea of Hawa and Adam being in prison of sorts, and then the snake being very similar to the epic of Gilgamesh and the Sumerian flood tale, where you do have, I think it's Enlil who identifies, I can't remember the Sumerian name for Noah, but identifies and says, go make a ship of this, these measurements that's going to save you. Right? So if we're talking about a serpent, a connection to the serpent and what it does, this is another time that you're seeing the serpent showing up again. And I don't want to say showing up to save human or to save a human, but offering an option. Right? Kind of saying, you have will, here's an option. There's going to be a flood, but here's one way that you can survive. Yes.
So that disobedience comes up again. Either way, disobedience is a major theme. But I brought up Methuselah because I forgot to touch on him with the bloodline. Because as we know in the Bible, the flood was prophesied by Enoch. And judgment will not come until your seed dies. So as soon as finally Methuselah gets his berries, which no one brought for him, he had to go get the berries himself, which I thought was significant too, because it's like he's giving all these warnings, he's giving all this knowledge, and no one can bring him any berries. And finally he gets his berries and the flood starts. So I thought that lined up. It was good. It was really good symbolism for me, at least, representing that when Methuselah passes, that's when Noah can replenish the earth.
I see. Everybody's laughing at the berry statement. Did we read this one? The serpent was okay.
Master Menelik says the serpent was green and shed its skin. When Hawa was walking towards the fruit, Adam was stooped over, where the snake's skin was shed. I thought the skin being passed down was the same thing.
Lineage. And Yakira Eden says, yes, the gold snake skin stood the test of time.
Mm-hmm. The serpent starts out green and sheds the green, turning black. I didn't remember that part. That's true. And Akira Meek says the green snake kept popping up in Noah's vision, maybe as a warning that he would have an enemy in his camp. Who was his enemy? Was it Nama? Name? Well, in this film they call her Name, but in the Bible they call her Nama. All Grandpa, I'm telling you, all he wanted was these berries, blueberries.
Yeah. So I wanted to go back just to touch on the significance of that color change, because that green represents fertility. That green represents new life, new prospects. And then the shedding, yeah, it sheds, but then it turns dark or it turns black. That blackness is the oblivion and, the absolute destruction that we see, but it represents a cycle of fertility and death, or birth and death, which wraps right back around to birth again, right? So I definitely saw that significance between the color changes. And it's funny you mentioned the gold snake skin, because at one time when I first saw the film, I actually thought it was an old chain glove.
Oh yeah,
right, an old ancient chain. For some reason, I'm not sure why, but that's what it probably just reminded me of that. It reminded me of that.
Does anybody remember what Methuselah's name means in Hebrew? Pop it in the chat, please.
Pop it in the chat while we wait. While we wait for you to include Methuselah's name, the meaning of Methuselah. Imanaya says that is true. He couldn't have tasted that berry because as soon as he put it in his mouth, yeah.
But that seems significant as well. Like he couldn't experience the. Like he couldn't experience the what is it called? What is it called when fruits? He couldn't.
What do you mean? What is it called when fruits?
I just went blank. He couldn't experience that because of what his name means. So that's what, yeah.
It's funny because it reminds me of the experience that Moses has, right? Like he brings everyone to the promised land, but can only get that far, right? So he kind of has the same. Methuselah kind of has the same role in a sense, like he's a guide, but doesn't get to experience the fullness of this new, what is new to him. I also found it significant too that his grandson came to him but did not bring one offering.
Not one berry.
Right?
I just go to my granny's house without bringing something. I cannot. She will talk about it for days.
But why not? How could you go to an elder's home and not bring one offering? I just found that was off. But that's it. That's probably just my thing.
No, Master Menelik says they don't respect their elders. You shouldn't have even had to ask them for the berries.
Right. This is okay. The aspect of Anki being the serpent and the Luciferian aspect is broken down more in the Law and Order segment. It gets really deep, y'all. So we're going to add, because we don't have Law and Order, but we're going to add the Law and Order segments to the description below this film. So after, we end, you can kind of jump on in there and scroll through some of the resources. These are all Chief Yuya's resources or Anu resources. Emanaya says, they only went to get or take from him. No one took anything. They didn't even discuss his mentioned berries. True. Nama and Ham were who the snake was representing in Noah's dream.
Lama and Ham. Okay.
Yes.
That that like that division,
Right.
Yeah.
And I think he would mention enemy in the camp. Or
Which
someone
is-
mentioned.
Which is what Enlil represents. He's the one who caused that dissension in the camp. So.
In the camp of the deities, you mean right, true.
Did anyone get? Okay, you found it.
So
Yes.
Death.
Yes. Methuselah comes from the root word met, which means death, and or moving into the unseen. And Saleh means to bring forth or speak. So Methuselah was bringing forth death, and it also means the man of the spear.
Man of the spear.
Mm-hmm.
So Imanaya has it, and top tier speakers too. She says Methuselah means death or sorrow comes forth, or his death shall send.
Yeah.
Man of the dart. I wonder why man of the dart.
I don't know, but it mentions. I don't have that thought formulated right now, but I'm gonna leave that in Genesis. It does mention the spear beneath the clouds, so I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
The spear beneath the clouds.
Or behind the clouds.
So it makes sense that there's that cycle of death and flooding, being connected to death, and then moving to the cycle of rebirth again.
Well, once as Enoch was, told, once Methuselah passes, then his seed can be redeemed with
Right.
Noah.
With Noah, I see. Okay.
You didn't need to put Nama as a snake, literally, but she kind of was.
Yeah, I don't know what I was doing. Yeah, but she was. I think she was. There were some moments throughout the film where there was, even though you see there was some support, there was still questioning, right? And we see that later toward the end where, and this is something that I find interesting because to a certain degree, the film actually paints Noah in a bad way, right? Because there's a focus on Hollywood is trying to stir emotion, right? Because when you think about all of these animals being saved and then the ark doors being closed on humans, that type of visual is meant to create some sort of emotional connection. So you begin to forget all of the chaos, all of the vices, all of the destructive behaviors and the lawlessness that we've been seeing throughout the film, so that you can now say, compassion for those humans who killed each other, were hustling and day trading babies.
Once they auctioned off the babies for food,
That's it.
I'm good. I mean, bring the flood.
Bring on the water.
Commence the flood. I'm good. Yeah. Nama had her own agenda for her sons in the movie. Yeah, and she bypassed Noah and went straight to Methuselah after he told her, don't go. So, I don't know. I think she was a bit of a slither. She had some slithering in her. Akirami said, yeah, she would go dip off and get a reading with. Yeah, exactly.
And get a reading. Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. True. This is true. So, we do have a couple other questions that I'm thinking about the value of her going to Methuselah and Methuselah using that as an opportunity to what what's her name? I can't remember her name, but pass on fertility to Isla. Isla. So I wonder why he chose to do so, right? And this is like entirely based on the film. So I want you, share really quickly, why do you think Methuselah chose to comply with Nama's request?
Which is nowhere in the Bible. By the way. So why was it a part of the movie? That's a good question.
It is.
You can pat yourself on the back now.
Why?
No, it's a good question. I think it maybe to carry honesty.
Right.
How are they gonna repopulate? But he's also he was also divine. Like he was also God. Methuselah is a God, so maybe he was doing part of his own experiment. I have no clue.
Ramik says, yes, she did go dip off. We read that part. Mendelek says, Western values were injected into another culture's mythology, and we got lots of talk about being motivated by love. Oh boy, yes, that's correct. Toward the end, there's this whole spiel and focus on love, and I kept questioning and saying to myself, if not, if not for obedience, there was so much disobedience and so much disrespect toward Noah. So why would there be a question about love? And why is the ultimate act of love him doing the opposite of what Yah instructed him to do? Because you're right, his instruction was literally see or no. If it's the branches, they got to be trimmed. If it's the roots, they have to stay. And I thought that was significant because, when we think about the biblical account of the flood, there are lots of different sides. Some sides say it's local, some sides say it was global, right? That flood was global as opposed to local. But then think about it. There are other nations in the earth at this time, right? And when I say branches, I'm referring to girls. And when I say roots, I'm referring to boys. So the gender that actually brings forward the lineage is the boys, right? Because the boys can mate with, right? And
bin.
What's that?
Bin.
What do you mean bin?
Bin. I'm saying the boys.
The boys bin. Thank you with the Hebrew, because I'm like, bin what? What do you mean? So the boys can actually mate and expand that lineage or expand their roots. The girls would actually be embraced into another man's camp or another man's culture or lineage and expand, but at the same time expanding into someone else's homestead or someone else's house, family, right? So I thought that was, and let me know what you saw as you looked at the film, but I thought that was a significant part in the film that I had to reconsider, that it wasn't just about girls or kill the feminine and keep the masculine, which some people would like for us to believe is the case, right?
I think it was a very feminist, that's where the feminism came in, and it kind of links to what Master Alex says, that many of the plot points in the film bent towards the wishes of the females. It bugged him that Shem's woman was the voice of logic in the relationship, while he just stood behind her, agreed, and loved Cookie. I think that was intentional, definitely.
It was and he could not see, again, Ham as well as they could not see the value of what Noah's purpose and task was. And I kept going back to that. It's something that you're saying, but I almost I don't even think I regarded some of his actions. Shed. Excuse me, I'm good.
And then they put Nama in the place as the compassionate one, but that cost of that compassion was disobedience, says Sister Yafe. Yeah, I think that's why the serpent energy came in, in the film at least. I think that's what Aki Remik was saying as well.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if Noah did end up paying for not killing the twins. Possibly he was out there drinking wine, so he probably couldn't live with himself at that point. If Shem was his heir, his mind should have been the closest to his. Yet it's Isla's who seemingly talks sense into Noah. Plus, snakeskin blessing was directed towards the twin girls, not Shem, and it was twin girls, which was interesting. Yeah, I think we see that's where Hollywood's intention plays out. Not that it's not playing out through the entire film, but really that feminist storyline comes out.
Western values were injected. Did you read that one? Into mythology, we did. Yafe says, I think the focus on the Noah killing the babies could have been to evoke. Did you read that one? No. Okay. To evoke emotion and make a connection to people who support abortion. Baby killers like propaganda. And this is true because what you're saying also helps to underscore that the film also paints Noah as he has barbaristic tendencies, right? Like he is not, what was the name? What's called? Almost like a Viking, just kill everyone, pay no attention, do not have compassion. And even when it comes to innocent babies, I think that word was used as well or thrown around. Even when it comes to innocent babies. So he is being painted in a sense, not so much as a man who is obedient to the word of the Most High, but one who is neglecting the human condition and neglecting the human plight for compassion and for grace, right? So it kind of twists the biblical story around. And I think what that does is it helps to diminish the value of the idea of a creator or a greater creator or the Most High.
Yeah, I think it twists the story of Name around as well, because I think in the Bible she's actually a chieftain, as Chief shared, and I'm pretty sure she's pretty obedient. So I think it twists the story around and validates her rebelliousness.
Many of the plot points, you read this one?
Yeah. You read all of those.
Oh, all of those. Okay. This one too?
No, not that one.
Okay. We're gonna multiply. No, let me read it the way it's written. Who gonna multiply them girls? Is Ham gonna come back after 14 years? Noah to return of the.
Gotta be the booty warrior.
Okay then.
But remember, this is okay. We can talk about it being a flood because there are other nations. And in the same Bible code teaching, Chief shares that this is a beginning. So there were other Elohim experimenting with other nations during this time. Maybe not in the movie, but in the Bible, there are other nations that have other Elohim over them, other than Yah.
Menelik says Noah is portrayed as the hyper-religious, abusive drunk. This right.
Turned into a wino. Oh man.
That and it's funny because when the film got to when they finally got to that part toward the end, I started to say to myself, it's almost like they were fishing for or trying to find ways to end the film. Because some of it did not, I could not understand why he was, on a, it seemed as if he was on a deserted beach just drinking for a very long time, which wasn't the case. Which wasn't the case.
Isn't that how chapter 8 ends?
What part? So read part of chapter 8 for us.
I'll find it. And Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done unto him. And he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant. Of servants shall he be unto his brethren. Oh, okay, yeah. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon their shoulders and went backward and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. So he was drinking wine. But wine could also represent something else, as we've learned. So, I would like to read this in Hebrew and see what the meaning of what words were used
for wine.
Right. And drunkenness.
True. Menelek says it was when he cursed Ham. And Ham looked like he wanted his own father. Okay, so let's flash back to bloodline and manhood. Let's go back to that theme. If you remember, there are a couple of scenes in when they're in the ark, and though Tubal Cain curses Noah and the ark, that bugger found himself inside the ark to save himself. I couldn't let up on that part. I was like, look at you over here cursing everybody, talking about take my whole nation. And when they got slewed, you snaked your way into the ark of redemption, right? How? I saw him as a representation of a snake as well, because you can see him influencing. This is another part that really sickened me about Ham. He was easily influenced, even though he lived a life set apart. He was easily influenced by the words of Cain. And I had to keep saying to myself, why was it so easy for Cain to convince him to make an attempt at his father's life, at Noah's life? Why? And I want you all to share a little bit. What were your thoughts on that scene? Because I found that scene to be profound, right? It was really, really important and had a huge bearing on the idea of, separation and lineage and legacy, but also the rejecting of a blessing.
Mm-hmm. And maybe it could be, I'll wait till everyone else answers, but I have a feeling it has to do with nations and different bloodlines and what exactly Ham means, which I don't know. But I think it's a part of a equation in the Helios Biblos, not in Noah the film.
No.
But according to Josephus, Ham not only discovered his father asleep, bucket naked, but he also laughed. Oh, Josephus, this Josephus.
Right. This was the result of, not a result, but this is what caused him to be cursed.
Imanai says, I think that played to when Lama was screaming, telling him he'd lose his family and stuff, yet also still trying to follow scripture with him being drunk. Imanai also says, but Tubal Cain said he would be in the ark. And he was. He did say that.
This is true.
And if he wants what Noah has, why wouldn't he find himself on the ark? He is a descendant of Cain, who is the serpent. The serpent is the whisperer.
Thank you.
But how is Ham a descendant of Cain? Yeah, how is Ham a descendant of Cain if he's coming from Noah? Brother around
I
me.
think you're saying Tubal Cain.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about him.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I agree. Sister Yafe.
Yes.
Aki Ramik says, elaborating, Ham looked at Noah while he was naked. The look on his face was the same look he had when he saw Shem and his girl in the bush. He was covetous, I guess, by nature.
Ham.
Mhm.
Well, so yes, and remember, all Ham's focus for and his understanding of manhood was literally about, oh gosh, I don't want to be disrespectful. It was literally about mating with a woman. That's all he saw. Manhood was equivalent to. That's why his father Noah had to say to him, "What's that?"
He wanted the booty.
He wanted to boot her. Okay. That's why his father had to say to him, a man has to do what needs to be done. And that was what that meant to me in that moment was, and I'm not a man, so I can't. But from the perspective of looking at the film, Noah understood that his call and his purpose was to be obedient and follow through with something that was really hard. That was very hard. He had to close those doors and listen to people crying out in pain and anguish, but he had to follow through on the law. And so that was one of the things he was able to do because he had a spine, right? And he was able to be obedient and understood what a man needed to do. But Ham was covetous because, again, his focus was on mating. His focus was not on following law.
Y'all are coming with the answers. Thank you.
Ham to protect us around, also hot. Okay, so hot because I was about to ask. So how does it connect? What?
Sorry, I'm going.
No, go ahead.
I said it's foot hot. Hot with envy, yes. Yes, you were curious.
Desire to serve and hot to meet, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. You could read the next.
Master Menelik says, I saw him being kind of disgusted. This dude didn't go find me a wife. I go and find my own wife. Instead of helping me save her, he forced me to abandon her. Then he threatens my brother's child. Yeah, he was over Noah. He was over it all. But he found a wife in a pool of dead people.
Come on.
At the bottom of a pool of dead people. In a ditch. But maybe I don't know. Different folks, different strokes. Now here he is, drunk and naked on the beach in the world. He decided to let die. So okay, yeah, that's true, Mr. Menelik. So he's like, what was the point of all of this? For you to come back and get drunk. Yeah, she got trampled. Imanaya says, even when Ham met Tubal Cain initially, he was easily influenced even though he repeated what his father told him. He walked back with a weapon and was resistant to give it back. So he couldn't resist the serpent either. And maybe he wasn't supposed to. He did have a look of disgust. He was done like, get me someone else so I can go bounce. Get someone to help so I can bounce.
Well, that part where he did show a bit of resistance, as I looked at it, I realized that Tubal Cain then also took on the role of his father. And Ham's rebelliousness to authority, to anyone who would dare even give him, some semblance of an order or a directive. I think that's where some of that rebelliousness came from. He probably saw himself too in Tubal Cain.
That makes me wonder who's his father? Like we always reading about, in Genesis, the different wording used when, that intimacy is happening. Like Yah knew, or Adam knew his wife, but but the Lord sent her a son. Like, so who was his father? Was it Noah, or was it something else?
Something else might just be right. You want to go to the next?
I read that one, but Yakir Eden says that Hamite mind is also something to consider. Yes. It was on him, not in him, Emaniah. Says Master Lama.
This is true. This is true.
Thanks.
Yeah, this is good. This is good. There was, I just think that there was a lot to be shared about some of the exchanges that actually happened in the ark along the journey, and I think the one that I kept focusing on again was that the relationship that we see between Ham and Tubal Cain, because I can't get over the fact that there is an intruder, someone who you do not know, inside of your camp, and you say nothing. Maybe I'm extending this too long. Yes.
Ham, okay.
Yeah. There's an intruder in your camp, right? How long did they spend creating and building this ark? And I know we're focusing on the film a lot, and you know that the ark was a separated space. But at the same time, there's an intruder, there's someone who you know is in direct opposition to the laws that your father follows, and you say nothing. And I wondered if he shared or said something, if that would have led to some sort of redemption. Not ignoring the fact that each Ham, Shem, and Japheth, each of them have a role and a function as one of the sons, but also as a nation or progenitors of a nation. So, I don't want to ignore that, but I just couldn't help to think about how disloyal he was.
Yeah, I think that links up with what Yakir Eden says. We have to pay attention to the Hamite mind, because I think in the film they're acknowledging that Ham is the father of Canaan, and the words are very similar. Cain and Canaan are very similar. So I think that's what they were acknowledging. So just that each son represents a different nation with different attributes.
Right. Different roles, different functions.
Yakir Eden says he was focused on self-preservation and selfish desires. So turning on his father was on par for the course. Emaniah says the girl that got trampled was named Nael, meaning gift from God, surrounded by dead bodies.
That's interesting, because now that name leads us to, ask the question. Yeah. Was she a gift? We're all turning down our noses at the fact that she was in a ditch of dead bodies, But I guess she was a gift for Ham.
Yeah. Yeah. A gift from which God?
Right, true. A gift from which God? True. El, yes, true. God from Elohim. Well, yeah, it's unfortunate that gift didn't, last. Didn't have no warranty, no nothing. Okay.
No warranty.
Right. It was just a bad joke. Bad joke.
Pastor Menelik says, Ham in this movie seems to represent those who do the work only for an expected reward. Yeah. Emaniah says, Ham didn't...
No, go ahead.
Okay, you guys are getting Sister Maria fired up with this Ham business, because Ham didn't just not say anything. he was helping Tubal Cain and feeding him.
Yes.
Yeah, he's feeding them the animals on the ark. I was like, this. Master Menelik says, also take into account that this is a retelling of a story in an alien culture's image, because these people, for gosh darn diddly sure ain't Hebrews. No, but they are ish. They are, you know what, ish. So I'm going to retwist everything with some technology.
Right. Of course. I was a Hamite trying to go back and save dead people.
What?
I don't know. What was that, Ramik? I didn't get it. I tried to figure it out.
Also, I almost laughed when Nama's defining trait of Ham was his integrity. That's true, you know. Where did that come from? I almost think that Noah wasn't his father. I'm thank God. Thank God that.
Right. On Nama, you know, like her eyes were in eclipse, maybe. Like, where else? How could you not see? How could you not see that there was a lack of integrity?
Mm-hmm. I guess being that mother aspect where you just love your children through anything is what they were trying to play on, because that was that they commented on that. Wouldn't you do anything for your child? She was asking Noah, wouldn't you do anything? And just like I'm doing anything, so maybe they were playing on that. Exactly, Sissy Alfe, from which God?
Right, true.
You know, was she a gift?
Was she a gift? Yeah, her name was Gift from a God. Some God. We don't know who.
But I also wanted to speak about the Nephilim. You know, we didn't get to touch on that yet. It's in it. Can you show that picture? I didn't even notice this until we went back over the film. But they're at the beginning. They're right at the beginning when Tubal Cain is attacking Lamech. And they're backing him. So I found that interesting that the Nephilim sided with Tubal Cain in this rendition of the story. What did you all think of the Nephilim?
You know, it's interesting that they're I thought the representation of them as well, we get to see their story of their anchoring and caging inside of, a rock encasement, right? So that's a representation of them losing divinity in a sense and now becoming anchored to earth or anchored to human desire. And what the story actually, the backstories in the film actually they're identified as the Watchers, right? They're identified as the Watchers, and what we see in their stories that when Adam was cast out of the garden, they left the heavenly planes with the intention of helping him or coming to his aid. Mm-hmm. But they lost all of their flight and all of that heavenly divinity and became anchored because their desire was no longer to remain in heaven, but they desired Adam. They desired to save him so much that what I saw was their desire for earth. And so that is what leads me to connect to the idea of the Nephilim, right? Because it's that desire to mate or to lay with the daughters of men. So was it really to help Adam or to help yourself?
Yeah. So that's why the flood had to start, because Elohim was like, sweep them, because that wasn't part of the plan. That wasn't part of the plan. The Nephilim were not supposed to be mating with the daughters of men. That's an abomination. So I thought that at the beginning that was a stark symbolism of that story. Master Menelik says they were helping them at first. In the book of Enoch, they taught the sons and daughters of men various sciences such as metalwork and even how to use makeup to look pretty for them. I'm sorry. Imanaya says they seem to have been so far from what they were supposed to be because of humans that one watcher had faith in what Noah said, so he helped him. Then eventually the others came around.
Yeah. And their redemption, and maybe I'm wrong, I thought that it was a beautiful way to play on our emotions too, because now we see them being like the act of being cast out of heaven being reversed. So through aiding and helping, regaining faith, and then aiding and helping Noah as they fight, they're released, like they receive redemption, and they're actually released from that earthly encasement, and you see them shooting back up into
As light.
into the light.
As light.
As light, right, exactly, as light. And, but it's also interesting that as they were moving, you could see it's in between, right, the crevices of the joints, so to speak. So it almost reminded me that we all have an earthly encasement, but there is that part of us that it is like the soul, right? It's unaffected by the human condition and the human experience, and it will always remain at our core, even though we always see the physical flesh and the corruption. Like them, there's always that inner soul that remains consistent and knows like there is redemption.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think what you said about the being them encased in rock just represents how tethered to the human experience they were and how they mixed the bloodline. That's the mixing of the bloodline, which entrapped them here. Master Menelik is sharing something from Enoch, chapter 1, First Enoch, chapter 2, verse 8. And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony and the beautifying of the eyelids and all kinds of costly stones and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in their ways. Thank you for that. Sister Yafe says it was the instant forest that sprung up from the Most High that made them change their mind. It was like, oh, he's watching. Maybe we can go back home and go get to work.
Yeah, but there weren't even, what I thought was beautiful, there was no comment about that. There wasn't even an assumption that there would be redemption for them through helping, right? They only realized that on the battlefield when they were fighting for the right person, right? When they were fighting for the right person, and I thought that too was also very significant. And thank you, Master Menelik, for the Enoch reference, because now we see the connection between the idea of oh my goodness, the Tubal Cain being, that like his focus being entirely on war and battles and the tools of war, and so it didn't just come from him. It wasn't just a blessing. Like, he was afforded that opportunity to learn it and use it, but he used it for ill, right? He used it for ill. And I wonder what was, as you share about Azazel, I wonder what was the reason behind giving them the science of working with tools and the science of it kind of reminds me of the value that's placed on war, even now.
But weren't they not, like, even with Tubal Cain, was he doing it for ill, or was he doing it for because that's what he was supposed to do? That's what his name means.
Right, true.
You know? And his madness is what brought about newness. You know, it's not glorifying his madness,
Of
but
course,
we just have to pay attention to, like, these are the generations, and also, you know, the equation in the names, as Chief has shared, like, it's not just random names that are put together. So
true. So the names, all of the names within this account of a flood is a formula. Something, someone said something earlier. I think Ramik said something. Oh, Ramik says, man, I was a Hamite trying to go back and save dead people. And Master Menelek actually says, nah, Ramik, we're Shemites, which is why I'm not letting Mr. Easy Breeze review the book. He even looked non-threatening while literally stabbing someone. Wow. I just wanted to go back to that. I wanted to make sure that we
that's purposeful too, to make Shem so unthreatening. You know.
Right. The soft one. He ain't got nothing to say.
Nada.
There was one other. Okay. Sister Yafe says it was that instant forest that sprung. I wanted to talk about the instant forest just because it reminds me of foreshadowings. It reminds me of similarly when you said Enoch knew that the flood was coming and shared and spoke about it. There, you know, in many of these accounts or these stories, there are always there are these bits and pieces of threads or stories that are told or passed on, or cues and some experiences that many look for as an indication. What happened?
I'm sorry. Pastor Melly. The film credits should read Emma Watson's husband.
It should read what?
Emma Watson's husband instead of his actual name.
Oh boy.
Sorry. Go ahead. I try to focus.
I done forgot what I was gonna say.
the forest springing up.
So the forest springing up was a direct indication. So they knew to look for a forest springing up out of the desert as a clue. And I just think about as people who are Shemites, people who are Semites, people who are followers of the way, if we are astute enough, if we're studied enough, if we have a discerning eye to see those representations of the beginning or the ending of cycles, you know, and understanding some of the clues toward that should push us toward migration, right? Because this thought kind of connects a little bit to the affirmative that Aki El Karar did on migration and moving, right? So it makes you think about the purpose of separation and the purpose of moving to a location that can be safe, right? And offer redemption, but offer some sort of preservation.
Yeah, I agree. And also if we're connected to, like, if we disconnect from that Cain mind, which is wanting to possess things, you know, purposelessly, you know, just leading our lives without a purpose, but trying to find out, like that's the curse, as Chief has shared, that we're trying. When you're in that Cain mode, you're wandering. You don't even have. You want everything, but don't know why.
Right.
So you won't be able to see the patterns and when to move and when not to move. Master Menelik says, I liked how the doves follow the stream of water back to its source. I thought it was a nice touch of cinematography that also doubled as time to skip to the arcs near completion. Yeah, they did use some good symbolism
in the film. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That constant submerging underwater as well too. Like that's so significant. The seed, so significant. The seed looks like, I think it looked like an oak tree seed to me, but I could be wrong. But we can close out if you don't have anything else you want to build on. But one of the words that kept coming up again was water, mem. And so mem is a representation of the subconscious mind. That goes back to a point you made and back to Ima Yakira's point about, the brain versus mind. And pardon?
And Sister Yafe mentioned
and
it as well.
She mentioned it as well. It's a fearful thing, right? And it's also, it can be connected to what is desolate. And I thought that connected brilliantly to the environment that that they used for the film. That idea of the desolate space, and then connecting it back to Noah constantly being submerged underwater. Just a representation. Maybe the whole film is a representation of the subconscious mind. So this is all happening in the subconscious mind.
That was my take on it, but also, it doesn't mean that it's not concrete, because the subconscious mind, your thoughts do become concrete from the subconscious mind. So I think it was both. What do you all think? Yeah, do you have anything else to add on water? If so, leave it in the chat. If not, we are going to wrap it on up.
Wrap it up. I think we had another question. Did we have another question? We could wrap up. Oh, we had one other question. What symbols did you notice in the film, and what did they mean to you? And that's the last. And we talked about symbols. We talked about symbolism over and over again. But though we shared, now it's your turn. Share some of the symbols that were important to you that you noticed in the film, and we'll close out on that.
Master Menelik says, and it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters, and the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives among the children of men, and beget us children. And Samyaza, whom was their leader, said unto them, ... While he's finished typing, Top Tier Speaker said, I tied water into the salvation and redemption aspects of our lives. Yeah, that cleanliness. That is true. Yeah, and every time we see water in a flood story, that it does lead to a new salvation. Master Menelik has finished. So Samziah, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear ye will not indeed agree to this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual implications, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Okay, so that's why Samyaza was in the lead, the leader of them. I got you.
So there is that connecting. Just a comment on the watcher's sympathetic reason to go to Earth to help Adam. Right.
Give thanks.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I thought another symbol was the ark.
The ark, right?
Yeah, we spoke about that. The ark being a foreshadowing of Yahweh Shai. And I also found it interesting that almost the same wording was used at the beginning of Genesis when the Elohim are creating the heavens and earth, and what is hovering over the face of the earth? Oh yeah, and the earth was without form and void, and the darkness was upon the face of the deep. And almost that same wording is used when the ark is built and going across the waters. So yes.
You're gonna read it?
I'm gonna read it when I find it.
When you find
When
it.
I find it.
In the meantime, between time, they went to earth to help themselves. Yes, they did. They did. They feasted on, right? No wonder what we saw as a result of that was just everyone, all the nations that surrounded Noah were all deeply invested in vices, desires, just, absolute anarchy. It was there was a focus on desire. Mendick says, I saw the imagery of Western evolutionary theory superimposed on an ancient story from another culture. How in what ways, can you expound a little bit more on the way you saw that Western evolutionary theory, and what is Western evolutionary theory? And then we'll close, because that's what you say, we'll close. Yeah, and the symbolism is a good thing to close out, because I think that there's even more to be discussed and to uncover.
When Noah was retelling the story of the creation.
There's more, and that's it.
We shall see.
Right.
I saw the imagery of Western evolutionary theory. Okay, yeah, I did see that as well. When they were starting from Neanderthals.
I got you. Okay, I see. Mm-hmm. This is true.
Yeah, they had to squeeze that in.
This is true.
So I found that in Genesis 7, verse 17, when the flood started. So, and the flood was 40 days upon the earth. And I lost it.
When you find it again,
No.
tell us. No?
Okay, yeah, I found it. And
go
the
ahead.
waters prevailed and were increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark went upon the face of the waters. So we have that face of the deep and then face of the waters again. God moved upon the face of the waters in Genesis 1. And then in Genesis 7, almost the same thing, but with the ark moving across the face of the waters.
Right.
So.
I think it's you were talking about the symbolism. So so based on those references, what do you want to share with us that
Just
you're thinking?
It links to the salvation part, but also to the subconscious of the Elohim. Like if there's a tie there, like that there's that redemption through Noah, because it's the same model. It's the same model, except Elohim is moving across the face of the waters in Genesis 1.
Right.
And then in 7, it's the ark. So it has me questioning, what is really the ark? Is it just a boat? Is it a boat that they keep on, having us associate with the word ark, or is it something else? Yeah.
Right, because when you say that, you can't help but to now begin to think about the Ark of the Covenant,
Mm-hmm.
and how all of these arcs are connected in some way, shape, or form, and a representation of something that is divine, You know, that is divine. And I remember in our, when was this? Was this back in March? I can't remember, but I do remember part of our sessions, one of our study sessions, which we engaged with the Anu family. We engaged in a study session on Wednesdays, every Wednesday, Yom Ravi. And one of the things that we were looking at was the Christ concept and foreshadowings of Christ. And one of the things that came up was the ark was a representation of Savior. Both arks, but also Noah as well, a representation of, or a Savior archetype, so to speak.
Agreed.
So we're going to close off. Thank you for sharing. Menelik says the images of the Big Bang, the formation of the planet, fish evolving into mammals, and the leading to the garden. This is true. I forgot about that part. Very, very similar to some parts of it, very similar to the Space Odyssey piece.
Thank you, top tier speakers. Remember when we were learning about the Sumerian myths, we explored the ark being a ship that could have been possibly hovering over the water.
Above the water, right.
So yeah, I think if we just look at things differently. Master Menelik said, I saw Methuselah as being a symbol of their higher thought, being the elder man who dwelt on the mountain. Yeah, that mountain was pretty symbolic. Because they had to climb, they had to go on a journey every time to reach him. And every time they went to see him, he had an answer. You know,
True.
or he brought them into another realm of consciousness with his potions. And he just wants some berries. Back to the island. You know, these berries. Give the man berries, huh?
All right.
But yes, thank you all for joining us. And we want to give a shout out to Chief Yuya for really, we wouldn't have gotten through this breakdown without the name, the code named in the Bible, and Bereshit series. So give thanks.
Yes, 4-part series. 4-part series. So next strong, we all won't be presenting, but Yakira Eden will be presenting, and she will be diving into Maleficent 2. All right, so there'll be way more to uncover. Make sure to watch the film and bring the people in your circle over to this here space on Thursday, so we can have some more bills and discussion on symbolism. I know she's gonna go deep. There'll be more to add on to Maleficent 1, which was really good. And if you haven't seen it, check it out. For those of you who came in and shared and engaged, thank you all. We're gonna see you again.
And we want to give another shout out to Creole Creations. If you're not following Creole Creations to get your lovely earrings, follow her on Instagram, and it's Creole with a K, Kreole. Spelled that right? Creation. and Sister Yafe says that mountain made me think of living in elevated places and how Annie should live. Yeah, Methuselah was away from all of the drama. That's why he always think it was berries. He was good. So yes, be Anu on that note.
I'm not rushing. It doesn't feel like it. It feels like it. I apologize. You all have more to share? We have more to talk about. We keep talking.
Sit here and skin teeth if you like.
They look familiar. Yes. So, one more thing before we go. Well, 2 more things before we go. Tomorrow we close out our strong with our Anu fellowship. So come on in and make it into the space at the God Hour on Anu Life Global Ministries. And we're going to just, rehash the strong and take a look at all of the points that were given on the affirmative, see how you applied it to your own journey. For those of you who are migrating very soon, You know, I think that discussion was very important. So, you know, we can build some more on that. And for those of you who enjoyed, I missed it, but for those of you who enjoyed more conversation on Paul and whether Romans is indeed is a pseudo gospel writing.
Well, this movie actually makes me think of the bloodline of Paul. You know, and yeah, I'll save that for the study group. We're gonna get into it in the study group, but this movie has me thinking a bit differently about Paul. And it's not about Paul; it's about is Romans fake?
But you know, everybody hates it on Paul for some reason. All right. Good night. Enjoy your chamomile tea, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Peace.